Welcome to Musing Heavy, the website devoted to alternative reflections on hard rock and heavy metal. My name is Steve Meyer, and this is the final part of my series entitled Collecting Heavy Music in a World of Streaming. And what I've done in this series, amongst a few other things, but largely I have been outlining some of the pitfalls associated with streaming, and particularly from the perspective of the heavy metal and hard rock fan. Although, as I said, this could apply really to any type of music. And also, in so doing, I guess I've been championing the value of maintaining physical product collections, collecting CDs, vinyl, maybe even cassettes, right? 8 tracks if people still have them, all right? And what we're going to do in this final part 5 of this series is obviously it's a summary, but I'm going to identify what I think are 3 really important self-reinforcing tendencies that music fans are being exposed to. Music fans of all stripes, really, but again, this will be specific to the heavy metal hard rock fan, right? And because of these 3 tendencies, we've seen the development of what I think are 4 fairly distinct profiles of how people consume music. And as we're going to see, most of the characteristics of these profiles involve both streaming and keeping physical product, right? So we're kind of see how this fits together. All right. So as always, if you want to read the entire essay, links are below. But let's share the screen for this presentation. So in summary, can old coexist with the new? And yeah, the quick answer is yes, it can, but let me explain here. Okay, so first, those 3 tendencies, those 3 trends I was talking about, let me discuss those quickly here. There are 3 important yet somewhat diverging tendencies that influence how a lot of people are currently viewing and consuming heavy music, or frankly, in a lot of cases, music in general, right? The first of these tendencies relates to what is the game changer, streaming and related technological developments. Like this has been, of course, a big deal. The process of streaming music is overflowing with listening opportunities. I think the big selling point of streaming, as I talk about in other parts of this series, is the quantity available to you at a reasonably low price or perhaps virtually free, right? There is now, if you're a streamer, you know that there is no need for a designated space to store large album collections, right? I mean, if you maintain a CD collection or a vinyl collection, yes, you've gotta give up a lot of space to keep these collections. Nor do you have to spend a whole lot of money. It doesn't. Your budget doesn't take a big kicking because streaming is cheap, and in some cases, depending on the platforms you use, pretty much free, right? So you can't get a lot cheaper than that, right? And even music player mode choices have been economized. Again, related technologies to streaming is how the infrastructure is changing as well. An expensive, cumbersome, multi-component stereo system is no longer needed for really good sound. I still maintain you're going to get the best sound from the more traditional stereo systems, but it's pretty amazing what's come out. All-in-one streaming units are not only small and not intrusive to the room's decor. For some people, that's a big deal. They don't like all these components and big speakers all over the place. They like it to blend in with the room's, decorations and stuff. Well, that's here too, right? So not only are these streaming units small, but they're surprisingly pleasing in terms of sound quality. And they're not super expensive either. Like to some degree, you get what you pay for. But you don't have to spend a whole lot of money to get pretty good sound and out of really small units, which is an appeal to a lot of people, right? And also, various other technologies have made the personal geographies of music consumption nearly ubiquitous. What do I mean by that? Well, with streaming, one can stream their favorite albums in the entertainment room, in the shower, on walks, in the gym, in the car, in the backyard, at the park, in the mall, pretty much anywhere you can think of, right? So all of this is shaping how many people expect to consume music. A lot of people, the way they see it now and probably in the future, it needs to be cheap, it needs to be plentiful in choice, and it needs to be mobile, right? And so streaming and related technologies are really fitting in with those types of demands that some people have in terms of consuming music, and actually a lot of people have. Okay, so that's the one tendency, what, the changes that streaming and related technologies are bringing to the way we consume music. Now, the second tendency that I think is still related to all of this is one that's a whole lot more historical in nature, right? Streaming is still a relatively new thing, but this has been around kind of forever, as long as we've had human beings. And it's still relevant today. Bottom line, some folks are basically hardwired to accumulate things of interest, or if they're really obsessive about it, to hoard stuff, if you want to put it that way. Again, people collect all kinds of stuff. They collect coins and have for generations, but some people still collect coins. They collect comic books, they collect stamps, baseball cards, hockey cards, all kinds of sports paraphernalia. Some people collect coins, some people collect jewelry. Antique furniture is still a big deal to some folks. Some people collect wine. Others collect toys and figurines and all that sort of stuff. Some people collect autographs, whether it be, favorite musicians or sports figures or politicians or whatever. And also, people do collect things in the digital world, digital collectibles, such as non-fungible tokens or NFTs, right? People are collecting these things online as well, right? Of course, others collect music and lots of it, okay? And so this is not new. In fact, I suspect there's an environmental component at play here, and perhaps even a hereditary effect, right? I mean, what do I mean by that? Let's say if your parents, grandparents, uncle, or even not blood relations necessarily, but your circle of friends, etc., if they are or were collectors of whatever, music, stamps, comic books, whatever, antiques, there may be a greater inclination for you to be a collector as well, right? So there might be a hereditary component, or there just might be sort of an environmental component. People in your social group, if they're collectors, maybe it influences you to be a collector, right? Couple personal things here. I have 3 cousins and a brother-in-law, Dan, Matt, Eric, and Ingar, who not only possess encyclopedic knowledge of musical trivia that actually dwarfs mine in a lot of ways, but have been terminally ensnared by the music collector's bug in a fashion strikingly similar to myself, right? My cousin Dan in particular is almost like a mirror image of me in a lot of ways. He's all about CDs. He collects old stuff and new stuff, right? He's diligent about filling in holes. He's a completist with certain artists, and on it goes, right? Matt, Eric, and Inga are also collectors, and like I say, off the charts in terms of music IQ. They're all also great musicians, and Eric in particular is a gifted songwriter. The point is, there's this obsession with music with all 4 of us, right? And there's a tendency to collect physical product, collect knowledge, all that sort of stuff about music, right? In fact, not just my relations, but most people I personally interact with are gatherers of something. If not music, they collect at least something else. And they continue to collect physical product as we speak. Is there something going on in my family's biosphere and or genetics that encourage a propensity to accumulate music? I suspect there probably is, right? Or am I instinctively attracted to other collectors? Yeah, probably, because we got stuff in common, right? Regardless, I expect that accumulators of stuff, collectors, hoarders, whatever you want to call folks that collect things, will always be around. And I'm not convinced that present streaming or digital technologies can fully satisfy this subculture. I think we coexist with the streaming world, and I'll get more about that in a second, but I don't think it's completely satisfying to a collector, all right? Okay, so that's the second tendency, that many of us are hardwired to collect things, okay? The third one, now this one relates specifically to the hard rock and heavy metal community, right? Heavy fans in general have been notoriously loyal and willing to support favorite bands in multitudes of ways, often for decades. Like when you're a fan, you're in kind of for life, right? And there's, I know there's so many heavy fans out there. You pick your band, Black Sabbath, Rush, Metallica, like whatever, or maybe even more obscure bands that once you heard them, it was like, man, I've loved them forever, and that's never going to change, right? I don't know that there's any music fan that's more loyal than a heavy metal fan, right? And the bands talk about that all the time, right? But so knowing that, I think a lot of heavy fans understand the dilemma facing most acts that are not, say, at the level of Metallica, Iron Maiden, or Judas Priest in terms of popularity, right? Streaming and all of the other complementary technologies that have allowed this medium to take more and more market share from CDs and vinyl has made it more difficult for artists to make a living doing music, right? And if you want to know more about that, check out my part 2 where I talk about this quite a bit, right? Where I actually crunch numbers and show you that nowadays streaming it provides a very terrible payout for most artists, right? Yes, there are some advantages that streaming is bringing artists to. If an album or song that's recommended from an algorithm, if it's kind to a more obscure artist, then maybe some heavy bands might benefit from slightly higher propensity to be noticed. I mean, I guess that's possible. But even if that's true, this will never translate into any significant income boost given the current payout structure of streaming platforms, right? So that's a problem. Like the bottom line is, and I talk about this in other parts of the parts 2 and parts 3 especially. If creators and artists aren't being properly compensated, then we're going to have less creators and artists, going forward. And if that happens, we all lose, right? Okay. So due to the demands for inexpensive, virtually free, and highly mobile streaming technologies and services, so do these demands for the new way, the streaming and technologies, do they align with these other trends? Do they align with the collecting tendencies of some? Do they align with the loyalty of most within the heavy metal audience? So is the new way of streaming, is it aligning with these two other tendencies? Not that easily, right? Not that easily. I think it's safe to say that exclusive adherence to streaming effectively negates the act of collecting. And to some degree, that's probably why you would stream, right? If you're a longtime music fan and have completely abandoned your physical product, right? Say you used to collect vinyl or you used to collect CDs and say, I'm done with that. I'm all about streaming, right? And that's fair. And lots of people have done that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, right? But if that's the type of person you are, then it's likely that the act of collecting was a significant burden for you, or at the very least, not particularly enjoyable, right? So again, if you've gotten rid of your entire collection and now you're streaming, I would argue that in the past, then the act of collecting was never a big rush for you, right? In fact, it may have just been a burden. You're maybe like, wow, I'm glad I can finally get rid of all that physical product, and now I can just, I don't have to have any. I just stream, and I don't have to store any of this stuff, right? Okay, so I would argue, though, that the act of collecting was never really in your DNA, right? It just wasn't your thing, which is fair, right? And there's a temporal component to this, too. For many younger music fans, say folks under 20, or maybe even folks under 30, really, now that I think about it, the streaming approach has been so pervasive for much of their lives that other means might never have been seriously contemplated. I'm sure a younger heavy metal fan today, would not even think about buying, or they might buy some physical product, but to buy everything that they're listening to on CD, they'd probably think that's preposterous. Why would I do that, right? But if you have a predisposition to collect, it's hard to imagine that an all-in approach to music streaming would be pursued. Or if you did do that, it's not completely satisfying. So I think there's an incompatibility there, right? And also, how exactly is the fiercely faithful heavy music fan, whether you're old or young, reconciling that their bands are receiving very little in return for music streamed? In truth, compensation is way below the minimum wage of a third world country. So again, as I said, what bands are getting, is, unless you're Metallica, but if you're at where most heavy bands are, especially extreme heavy bands, they're making almost nothing from streaming, right? And so if you're the type of person that you're concerned that the artists you admire at least are being able to make a living, well, then the streaming world is probably causing a bit of a problem for you, right? It may constitute a crisis of conscience for some loyal heavy metal fans, while for others, you might not be bothered by it at all, right? And I'm not saying you should be. I'm just saying for those that want to support the artist, streaming is not gonna do it, right? It's just not going to work, right? So with these three tendencies sort of colliding in a way, I think what's emerged is four distinct profiles of of music fans of how they're consuming music. And I'm just going to outline that here. Okay, so I think there's at least 4 profiles we can point to. The first one is the unapologetically exclusive streamer, okay? And each one of these, I think, are populated by significant numbers of people. But the first one, okay, so what do we mean by that? Or what am I talking about here? Okay, this fan does not care about collecting stuff, right? In fact, they probably hate the idea of all that clutter, having all that vinyl around or CDs. They can't imagine why people would do that. Or if they had that in the past, it always bugged them, right? And also, this person does not worry about artist compensation. And it's fair enough. I'm not saying you should, right? I mean, there's folks out there that are going to say, you know what? I don't need this stuff. And it doesn't really bother me if artists are getting paid properly or not. I just want the music, right? Such a person is likely to hold the view that, say, if Metallica is the only heavy band that makes lots of money, so be it. Right? It's not my fault that streaming's taking over. Survival of the fittest and all that sort of stuff, right? So if you can't make a buck, then go do something else, right? I get it. I know there's people who think that way, and you're not wrong if you do, right? Also, this person probably wonders, they're scratching their head, well, why wouldn't you stream music if it's free? You know, they probably look at somebody like me who's still buying CDs and wonder, like, you know, why are you doing this, right? They probably just don't get why you would do it. If something is free, why wouldn't you take advantage of it, right? Their view is that this must be what the market value is. Music is essentially free. And if that's the case, hey, that's not my problem. Again, I didn't make the rules here. If somebody's going to give me all this music for free, well, why wouldn't I take it, right? Again, I believe there's issues with that. See part 3, where I think streaming, the problems associated with streaming that it has made music almost valueless, again, does have maybe some unseen problems. But on the surface, I get why that person would say that. You know, I didn't create this. It's not my fault. But if you're going to give me something for free, well, why wouldn't I take it, right? Totally get it. And so that is definitely one distinct profile of music consumer today. But the 3 others, we're going to see physical product still plays a role. Even if you do stream a lot, physical product still plays a role in varying degrees. So let me describe that. I think the second type of music consumer, I'm calling the reluctant PPP, or the reluctant physical product purchaser. So they do purchase physical product, but again, they're doing it sort of reluctantly. They're doing it maybe out of guilt a little bit, or obligation, or etc. Okay, what do we mean by that? This heavy fan mostly or entirely streams music. So they're pretty much full-on streamers, right? And they genuinely like streaming. Okay, they like I talk about some of the pitfalls of streaming. To them, they don't care about that. None of that really bothers them. They like streaming. They dig having the ability to have access to all this music, etc. But having said that, they are concerned, or even feel maybe a little bit of guilt about their favorite artists not being well paid by this approach. They get it. They love streaming for them personally, and there's no way they want to have it any other way. But they recognize that there's a problem here. If their favorite artists aren't being compensated, well, maybe down the road, maybe these guys aren't going to put stuff out, right? Because they can't afford to. They're not making any money. So what do? As a result, these folks, they purchase peripheral merchandise, right? So they're streaming the music almost entirely, or maybe entirely, right? But they go out of their way, say they're a Lamb of God fan. They'll go out of their way to buy a Lamb of God t-shirt anytime they find one, because they want to support the band. They might dig the shirt too, but the real reason they're doing it is to support Lamb of God. Or they love Megadeth, so they buy all kinds of Megadeth posters. Or they buy a Gojira hat, right, etc., right? So the point is, or a big thing, they always attend concerts whenever they can, especially, they probably would want to do that anyway, but they really like the idea of going to a show knowing that the band is definitely making some money off this, right? They'd never miss an Alice Cooper show when he's in town, for instance, etc., right? And you know, some of these folks might even buy physical music product. They might even buy occasionally a CD or vinyl, even a cassette, right? And they may never actually even play it. They're buying it, you know, just have the odd one here and there because they just like the idea, okay, I'm supporting the band a little bit, right? So maybe they buy it directly from the band's website so they get the highest cut of the action, so to speak, right? But again, they're full-on streamers, but they try to find ways to support their favorite bands in other ways, right? Okay, so there's that second profile. Third profile, I call this the enthusiastic PPP, or the enthusiastic physical product purchaser, where the second person buys physical product largely out of obligation to help the artist. This person is buying physical product. If it helps the artist, that's cool. I'm sure they don't have a problem with that. But they're buying it because they really, really want it, even though they mostly stream. Okay, or that they stream a significant amount. So what are we talking about here? This is a heavy fan that streams and maintains a physical music collection, and does so largely because that's exactly what they do. Even if the artists were being paid well, they'd still want to do this, right? It's self-interest. This one actually is harder to describe because it can be all kinds of different forms, but I'll just outline a couple of them here. Okay, so perhaps one streams nearly everything, right? So they're mostly a full-on streamer. However, completing the vinyl discographies of Slayer, or maybe one or two of their other favorite bands, right, is a constant goal. So they're mostly about streaming, but they love Slayer so much they just want all the albums and the album covers and the CDs. Any Slayer merch they just want to collect. Not because they want to support Slayer necessarily. They really want this stuff, even though pretty much everything else they're going to stream. Right? Okay, I know there's people out there that do that. Or another person who's kind of similar to what that person would do. Another might stream, again, pretty much everything, but will purchase any special physical releases, right? So maybe you're a big Black Sabbath fan and you've abandoned, your regular Black Sabbath CDs and vinyls years ago, so you're just streaming Sabbath. But when they come out with something really special, like a big box set of Paranoid or something, yeah, you'll buy those because they're special things, right? Again, and I think there's fans that do that. Someone else might be interested primarily in maintaining a CD collection. So this would be somebody who's a little more at the other end of the spectrum, right? They're mostly about physical product, right? But they don't have a big problem with streaming. They'll still stream, but their objectives are fairly clearly defined, right? So they're interested, they're mostly, say, have a CD collection or vinyl collection, yet they routinely stream and they use it as a tool to audition potential new purchases. Right? So the stuff they really like, they make sure to get on CD, but they stream to see, okay, do I really like this? Right? So they check stuff out. They stream it first and say, okay, if I really like this, I'm going to get it on CD. If I don't like it, okay, I'm just going to let go of that. Right? So, for example, they might wonder, is the latest beta release good enough to justify investing in CD? It is, by the way. But again, so they use streaming as a way to audition potential CD purchases. That makes perfect sense, right? There'd be lots of people that do that. And then the fourth, again, kind of related to the third one, I guess. And this would be somebody who's maybe really musically curious, right? And while maybe they mostly listen to hard rock and heavy metal, they like to check out other forms of music, just maybe keep abreast of trends or see what's going on out there, right? So they stream music that's not normally in their core interest, right? So let's say they're a hard rock fan, but they stream jazz, rock, fusion, or prog rock, or they check out, okay, what's going on with rap, or et cetera, right? So they'll always strive to have a complete CD collection of the metal stuff they really like, but they'll stream other forms of music just to stay informed. They're musically curious, right? And there could be other forms of this too, right? But again, this would be somebody who really likes the idea of owning physical products, CD and vinyl, et cetera, but they also have embraced the streaming world quite enthusiastically as well, right? So they like both mediums and they use them as tools to their own ends, right? And then the final profile, the streaming minimizer. Now, this would be somebody who displays a stubborn adherence to physical product, whether that be CDs or vinyl or cassettes or old 8-tracks, whatever, reel to reel, I don't know. And the reason they do that, this goes for reasons that go beyond a desire to support artists, which they probably think is great, but that's not why they do it. They do it because there's many things about streaming that frankly just ticks them off, okay? They're stubbornly all about physical product, and streaming, hey, I just don't like this at all. And there's lots of things about streaming that might annoy them. They might claim that most streaming platforms provide inappropriate sound quality, which is probably true in most cases. If that matters to you, that might be a problem you have with streaming. that might bug them that there's incompleteness of some discographies. Again, you can, yes, there's millions of titles available to you, but for specific bands, no, there's stuff that's missing, and that might really bug somebody about streaming, right? They believe that controversial albums could become discontinued on the streaming platform. Again, see part 2 in this series, where I do believe that's a real consideration. Or they just hate the whole computerized vibe of software and algorithms telling you what to listen to next and all that sort of stuff. They just don't like that. They like the idea of controlling everything about their music universe, having the physical product. They decide what they're going to listen to next, all that kind of stuff, right? And often, too, the streaming minimizer is also likely to get a rush from maintaining a heavy music collection on CD or vinyl, right? Because in part, they find the hunt for missing titles exhilarating. They like the act of collecting, right? They like that. There's something about the process that is almost as enjoyable as listening to the music itself. See part 4 in this series if you want a little more information on that. Okay, so just to wrap this up, if these profiles are accepted as a reasonable representation of most possibilities, I honestly couldn't think of another. I think those 4 are pretty much capture where people are on the streaming physical product continuum. I think that pretty much nails it. Let me, if you have suggestions of maybe a scenario I've missed out, I'd love to hear about it. But anyway, I think that's pretty close to the universe, if you like. If you accept that, well, one point I would make, it's striking how many scenarios still contain the utilization of physical products, such as CDs and vinyl, right? So when people tell you CDs are going to die, vinyl's yesterday's medium, I think that's completely overstating things. Streaming, no question. Streaming is most definitely today's big player in music consumption, and it's likely going to get stronger. But having said that, I do not expect that the demand, or hopefully the supply, for physical product will ever completely cease, right? So in other words, can the new coexist with the old? I believe absolutely yes. And I think I don't think things are going to change drastically for the foreseeable future. I think streaming will continue to be the big player, but there's going to be lots of people that are going to utilize physical product in various degrees. And I think that's going to continue for quite a while. So now it's time for me to put an Exciter disc in my name CD player and contemplate if the new Joe Satriani limited edition CD will ever come down in price. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it, whether you just listen to this part, the entire series, or any of the other series I've put together. I guess I've done about 7 or 8 of them, 7, I guess, of these over time. So I really appreciate any time you put in. And I'll be back at some point in the future with a new series. I don't know when, but it's gonna come. I'm not kidding you. I'm coming back. In the meantime, take care and all the best to you.